Hello everyone, and today my presentation is going to be on climate migration. To start out, I want to just discuss what climate migration is. It's typically when disasters like hurricanes, floods, or fires force families and individuals to move from their homes or communities, or sometimes even the whole country. In 2024, over 800,000 people were victims of at least 600 extreme weather events causing displacement from their homes across the world, and 437 of those events were unprecedented and could not have been predicted in a way that would have supported sustainable preparation, which means that despite the fact that we know climate change is actively happening, the events that were taking place that displaced people from their homes were unavoidable in a way that the community would have been able to sustain. Some of the systems that are involved with climate migration would be social, ecological, and technological. Climate events such as floods, rainfall variability, droughts, or other hazards are not the cause of migration. Rather, it's their immediate and midterm effects that trigger mobility. Mostly crop loss, rising unemployment, food price hikes, and poverty. So some of the social systems that are involved in climate migration would be social ties being strained. They lose communication with their families or people from their community who may have been forced to move in opposite directions. However, moving into new communities does expand their social network. Integration into new cultures. If you're forced to move out of your country or your community, you may be moving into a culture that's unfamiliar to you, which can be a benefit and a negative, because if you're expanding your culture, that's wonderful. However, there might be less people who are able to connect or relate or communicate with you in a way that relates to the culture that you were developed in. It also exacerbates the inequalities of vulnerable groups, so people who have financial struggles may be feeling that more intensely than somebody who is better off financially and can pay for lodging in a more developed community. Ecological systems would be the changing ecosystem. Sometimes it's adaptable, sometimes it's not. For example, California experiences droughts very frequently, and they've been able to adapt with their water systems as well as preparing themselves for the continuation of those droughts and the desertification. However, some other countries may not be able to adapt, like if they're experiencing more frequent hurricanes or flooding, and it might disturb their agriculture. Rising sea levels, resource scarcity like food, water, and agriculture are also involved in that ecological system. Technological systems would be things like their communication, power outages, warning systems. So if there's a wide range alert that goes out to people's phones, if people cannot afford phones in the community that's being affected by the climate event, that could be a negative impact or a barrier to that technological system, as well as power outages that could impact people's ability to attain resources and communicate with their family members or other members of their community. Ecosystems and services that are involved in climate migration. The impact in general, informal settlements have been linked to higher surface temperatures and heat stress compared to formal housing developments, furthering the risk of already vulnerable communities. So what that means is that sometimes a climate event that forces people out of their communities may lead to people being forced to settle in communities that aren't fit for large groups of people yet, and that can actually cause further damage to the ecosystem. Biodiversity, bringing communities, cattle, or agriculture from their native areas to new communities or geographical areas that could expand crop production, or it could bring invasive species to other areas, which could be a negative impact. Overcrowding communities. Some small cities and communities are unprepared to support an influx of population, so that could be an impact on the services. And then disease, introducing populations exposed to different environments. There might be diseases in one community that's forced to move, and that community has developed immunity, but the community that they're moving to has not been exposed, so they don't have the immunity, and that could cause the spread of disease. Geochemical cycles. The biggest impact from climate migration would actually be the carbon cycle. For example, the burning of coal, natural gas, and oil for electricity and heat is the single largest source of global greenhouse gas emissions. These are the primary drivers of global warming as they trap heat in the atmosphere and raise the Earth's temperature. So the raising of the Earth's temperature can lead to ocean levels rising, glaciers and ice caps melting, and droughts. These would be examples of extreme weather events and can lead to the destruction of communities or unsustainable living environments, which could further progress the issues of climate migration. Emergent properties. In 2018, the World Bank reported on the impact of climate change on migration, estimating that by 2050, climate change could force more than 143 million people to move from within their own countries. This leads to economic impacts. The negative impacts would be it limits access to support programs and resources. So people in the community who may need financial support or food support programs could be getting those things, and then when more people move in because of climate migration, those resources become more scarce. Also, potential job loss. There's more job competition, so people may lose jobs, or they might have to fight harder to obtain jobs. However, it could also fill job market needs, increase consumption of local services and supply, which then creates more demand and boosts the economy, as well as increasing wages or employment among residents because there's more potential for new businesses to develop with more members of the community moving in. Other emergent properties would be social cohesion. Residents may perceive challenges from climate immigrants for jobs, lands, housing, and services, which may lead to reduced social cohesion. The negative impacts on the economic market could create difficulties and conflict between the communities who are moving in and the communities who are already established there. Sustainable strategies, being proactive rather than reactive, which means developing more inclusive policies and better preparing our communities who we know are at risk of climate events, and also communities who may not currently be at risk, but estimating their surrounding communities and taking a look at how communities around them are being impacted so that they can prepare themselves for people who might be migrating in and see how they might be able to sustain a rise in population if it were to suddenly occur. Creating refugees in larger cities who are able to support more people moving in. And then again, assessing those high-risk areas. If communities around you are being impacted, it's likely that after a while, your community will be impacted as well. Development of warning systems could also be a great way to prepare ourselves for the impacts of climate migration. So being able to detect when a climate event might be beginning to occur, and a wide range communication form so that you can let members of the community know to get to a safe space and let other communities know that people might be migrating due to the event. Little to no attention is given to the proactive and combined relocation of physical infrastructure, homes, and businesses in at-risk areas. So this is a very key detail to focus on when assessing this topic. These are my references, and thank you so much.